Alright, picture this with me. A peaceful Italian convent, gentle prayers echoing through ancient hallways, and beneath it all, a secret so horrifying it makes exorcisms look like spa treatments. Today we dive into a chilling tale of faith twisted into madness, miracles rewritten by science, and a young nun who discovers that the real demons are wearing robes. Grab your rosary and maybe a flashlight, because this story gets dark fast. Our story begins not with serenity but with panic. The prologue, a night full of nightmares. A terrified nun, Sister Mary, chooses violence, stealthy violence, against the strict bedtime rules of the convent. She creeps into the superior's bedroom at night like a holy ninja, steals a ring of keys, and limps toward the locked gates with freedom glowing before her like salvation. But before she can taste liberation, four hooded figures appear from the darkness like the worst choir flash mob ever assembled. They capture her, brutalize her by breaking her leg, and finally knock her unconscious. She awakens later in a coffin, buried alive beneath cold earth. And just like that, we know this place isn't your typical church retreat. A miracle survivor joins the convent. Cut to our main character, Cecilia. She's the picture of innocence, the human equivalent of warm milk. She's got that "I want to serve God and definitely don't deserve what's about to happen to me" energy. Cecilia's past is marked by tragedy and a supposed miracle. As a child, she fell into a frozen lake and drowned. She was clinically dead for 7 minutes, long enough to terrify everyone except maybe that one doctor who's seen too many episodes of medical dramas. Yet she revived unexpectedly and grew convinced that God had saved her for a divine purpose. This belief becomes the guiding force of her life. Years later, she receives an invitation to join the secluded Italian convent, where elderly nuns are cared for, nurtured, and presumably prevented from escaping like Sister Mary failed to do. She says goodbye to her old life, arrives at the scenic Italian countryside, where evil apparently enjoys its best real estate. Father Sal Tedeschi personally invites Cecilia, his tone dripping with generous saintly mentor, but we've seen enough horror to know that's suspicious. Cecilia arrives and immediately takes her vows. She's wrapped in the ceremonial cloth, given a rosary, and welcomed with smiles so stiff they resemble plastered-on halos. Oddities begin to surface. It doesn't take long for Cecilia to get comfortable and uncomfortable at the same time. She quickly befriends Sister Gwen, who is sarcastic, witty, and clearly destined for doom. Gwen seems normal, perhaps too normal for this place, which immediately makes her the most suspiciously endearing character in the film. If there's one thing horror movies do consistently, it's punish the friendly ones. Then Cecilia observes something unsettling, an elderly nun limping around with cross-shaped scars burned into the bottoms of her feet. Cecilia wonders if this is some obscure holy ritual. Spoiler, it is not the kind Jesus invented. The convent's chapel also houses a relic, a supposed holy nail used in the crucifixion of Christ. Just a perfectly everyday item for a remote convent, totally not ominous or relevant to the plot. Absolutely not a Chekhov's nail. This relic is treated with such reverence that if someone sneezed near it, 6 nuns would probably pass out. The shocking revelation. Cecilia begins having disturbing nightmares featuring hooded figures, the same style as the ones who buried Sister Mary alive. Either something supernatural is happening, or the convent has very questionable midnight activities. Then comes the mother of all surprises. Soon after, the Mother Superior and the medical staff summon Cecilia with an announcement. Despite being a sworn virgin and despite lacking a romantic life or even electricity, Cecilia discovers she is pregnant. Naturally, Cecilia responds with the appropriate reaction: shock, confusion, horror, maybe a silent prayer asking God if there's been some heavenly mix-up. Because, as she calmly explains, she is a virgin. The convent, however, is thrilled. They treat her like the second coming of Mary herself. They speak of blessings, miracles, divine conception, basically every term you'd expect Catholic clergy to use if they were trying very hard to convince themselves they're not involved in something monstrous. Cecilia, meanwhile, is trying to figure out whether she's in a sacred miracle or a living nightmare. Considering the genre of this film, it's safe to bet on the latter. As Cecilia's pregnancy progresses, the story takes a darker turn when jealousy creeps into one nun's heart. Sister Isabel tries to drown Cecilia out of spite, fear, or possibly poor impulse control. After failing, she becomes consumed with guilt and ends her own life. Cecilia's health worsens. She vomits up one of her own teeth, which is unsettling even by horror standards. When she asks to be taken to a real hospital, Father Tedeschi flat-out refuses, with a serene contradiction that only horror movie priests can master. It is God's plan. Right, God's plan always seems suspiciously aligned with the villain's plan.
Lasciami, io lo so quando un uomo non è sincero.
Gwen lashes out at the convent leaders, demanding medical care for her friend. Her bravery earns her a one-way trip to the restricted area, escorted by Father Tedeschi and Deacon Enzo, because speaking up in horror movies is basically volunteering as tribute. Nothing good ever happens in the restricted area. The discovery that changes everything. Cecilia soon discovers something chilling. On the back of a Virgin Mary portrait in her room, someone carved the verse, 2 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 14, "For Satan himself transforms into an angel of light." A biblical phrase about false angels disguised as beings of light. Subtle? Absolutely not. Effective? Extremely. Fueled by paranoia, Cecilia sneaks through the convent's restricted areas, eventually discovering her personal file. What she reads horrifies her. Not only does the convent have detailed information about her childhood accident, but it also contains her chromosomal karyotype, proof that someone has performed extensive genetic testing on her, and none of it with her consent. Then she hears a muffled scream. Following the sound, she witnesses the full nightmare, Gwen being mutilated by a hooded figure who slices out her tongue. Traumatized and desperate, Cecilia pleads with an elder nun for help. Instead, the nun stares at her like a dead-eyed owl and says, "You will never leave. Convents with good customer service do not behave like this." The failed escape and the horrifying truth. Cecilia attempts to fake a miscarriage, so the leaders would be forced to send her to a hospital. The plan almost works, almost. But after the convent found a killed bloody bird under her bed, they realize she's lying. She attempts to flee, but they capture and restrain her, tying her down like she's the final boss in a medieval sacrifice ritual. Father Tedeschi chooses this moment to reveal his true identity, not a devoted priest, not a humble servant of God, but a former geneticist. A scientist who once spent years studying DNA and now wants to mix science with faith in the most unholy combination imaginable. He reveals his horrifying secret. He used DNA scraped from the holy nail to impregnate nuns, hoping to create an engineered savior. A Christ too, factory-made, not divinely conceived, and before Cecilia every attempt had failed. The fetuses were malformed, monstrous, unfit for survival. Cecilia, however, is different. She may carry the successful experiment, lucky her. To prepare her for forced sainthood, Tedeschi brands her feet with cross-shaped scars, just like the others who came before her. Truly a man of God, if the god was a raccoon trapped in a dumpster full of medical waste. The bloody uprising. With Gwen mutilated, her body breaking down, and Tedeschi revealing he's basically Dr. Frankenstein with a Bible, Cecilia hits her breaking point. Where she was having a checkup, she kills the Mother Superior using a crucifix. Yes, she literally beats a nun to death with a holy symbol, probably the last thing that crucifix ever wanted to be used for. Hey, quick break. If you're loving this recap and you enjoyed diving into wild stories filled with mystery, twists, and unbelievable reveals, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more recaps just like this, dark, thrilling, and unpredictable, make sure to subscribe and tap the notification bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Her water breaks mid-chaos, because of course it does. What's a horror movie without a very inconvenient pregnancy timeline? She runs into a cardinal who is busy enjoying a cigarette. She strangles him with her rosary. If Gwen still had a tongue, she'd be cheering. Cecilia finally discovers Tedeschi's secret laboratory full of jars, failed fetuses, documents, equipment, and horrors no lab safety manual has ever covered. She drenches the room in ethanol and tries to escape before the priest arrives. He catches her, they struggle, but Cecilia lights the ethanol, bursting the lab into holy flames. She escapes. Tedeschi manages to survive, slithering out of the burning room with his cassock on fire, probably smelling like roasted hypocrisy. The catacomb finale. The chase continues underground into ancient catacombs beneath the convent. Skeletons, dust, repressed sins, everything you'd expect. There, Cecilia finds Gwen's mutilated body. Next to it is a hole smashed through the wall, an escape route. Before she can crawl through, Tedeschi shows up again. Because apparently villains in horror movies have infinite stamina and take no damage ever. He attacks her, pins her down, starts cutting into her stomach trying to deliver the Messiah to himself. Cecilia grabs whatever she can, her hand closes around something metal, the holy nail. With a burst of desperate adrenaline, she stabs Tedeschi in the throat using the very relic he worshipped. It's poetic justice, biblical karma, and scientifically satisfying. The birth and the final choice. Finally alone, Cecilia crawls out of the catacombs and collapses on the cold ground. The contractions worsen. She gives birth completely unassisted, biting through the umbilical cord like a mother in a survival documentary. But then she sees the baby. It isn't normal, it isn't divine, it isn't anything that belongs in this world. We don't see it directly, but the film makes it clear this is not a holy child. It emits animalistic snarls, a creature born of manipulation and obsession, not miracle. Cecilia, shaking, traumatized, and utterly broken, reaches for a large stone. She hesitates, but survival and horror overpower maternal instinct. She kills the newborn. The final, chilling message is clear. Sometimes the only way to end evil is to destroy its creation. The film ends abruptly, leaving viewers shocked, disturbed, and probably confused about their next confession schedule. And that, dear viewers, is the unbelievable journey of a young woman who survived faith, science, betrayal, and the kind of pregnancy no doctor on earth could ever explain. If you thought convents were peaceful, think again. Let me know in the comments how you would have handled being trapped in a nightmare like this, hopefully with more grace and fewer flaming laboratories. If you enjoyed diving into this wild ride of horror, mystery, and scientific blasphemy, don't forget to subscribe to NChiTV. We explore the stories that twist your expectations, haunt your imagination, and keep you coming back for more. So hit that subscribe button and tap the bell. Because trust me, you do not want to miss the next descent into darkness. Until then, stay curious, stay safe. And whatever you do, don't follow strangers into convents.